Fallout Equestria the Chrysalis, Chapter 23, Part 2. It's hard to describe exactly what the Stable-Tech arcane targeting spell is like. It was as if I was hyper-aware of my weapon and targets. Every little movement, every little detail. As I brought my pistol onto the first target, I corrected the alignment of my sights, smoothly pulling back the trigger to fire the moment the weapon was on target. It bucked, and I smoothly compensated for the weapon's recoil, bringing it back for a follow-up shot. The moment the pistol recoiled, I transitioned to the next target, snapping off 2 more shots before reversing direction and firing twice on the final target. For that moment, I felt as if I really knew what I was doing. Sats fell off around the final shot, and I lowered my pistol to survey my work. I wasn't Dusty. No simple targeting spell was gonna change that. I'm sure he could have done better, likely even in the midst of combat. I was shooting in a calm situation, with my hooves firmly planted, and without the stress of combat or the threat of death looming over me. It wasn't some grand accomplishment or having a display of skill, but if those 3 bits of ruined wall had been ponies, every round would have hit. I slowly nodded, looking over the results of my shooting.
Okay, I think I'm ready.
We trekked across the roadless desert, seeking the locations Emerald had given us. They weren't far now. Our journey took only a couple of hours. The whole way I kept glancing at the information her pip-buck was showing me, watching the compass for the first sign of hostile contacts. But every now and then I would look back over my shoulder, the compass tape swinging around to show the navigation marker I had set. Serenity. Then I would turn back, focusing on the task at hoof for a few minutes more. Once again, we found ourselves lying on a ridge, scouting out the territory ahead. Half a mile away, in the gloom of the rapidly failing evening light, we could see the Raiders' base. According to Emerald's pip-buck, it had once been the Palomino Army base. 2 centuries later, the place was in ruins. The chain-link fence that had surrounded the heart of the base was broken and fallen. The rusted-out remains of a couple of tanks lay abandoned, as did the small collection of sky wagons and motor wagons in what had once been a motor pool. Now, it was nothing but a vehicle graveyard. Only 2 of the original buildings stood, side by side. One looked like a single-story barracks, while the other was a narrow 2-story office building of some sort. Every other building had been torn down, apparently scavenged for materials. Most of those materials went into the pair of walls that stretched between the 2 buildings, enclosing a small courtyard between them. Even the buildings themselves had been built up, with their outer walls reinforced and additional structure tacked on the sides and even the tops. All told, the pair of buildings had been turned into a single multi-level fort, maybe 100 feet wide. A single gate appeared to be the only way in or out, with its approach lined by the hulks of ruined vehicles, metal spikes, strands of barbed wire, and various bones. A crude collage of wasteland warning signs. The gate itself was watched over by one of the 2 watchtowers built atop of the walls. They were small, only enough for 1 or 2 ponies, and didn't look terribly stable, but they gave good vantage points. As for the walls themselves, they were uneven, especially where they connected the 2-story office building to the single-story barracks. Despite that, they looked to be heavily reinforced, and the walkways behind them offered good fighting positions to hold off an attack from any direction. The additions built atop the tallest building almost doubled in height, giving an even higher vantage point than the watchtowers and possibly serving as a final holdout if the walls were breached. The Raiders had themselves a small, crude, but effective fortress. On top of that, everything was packed in tight inside those walls. A stealthy intrusion would be difficult. Suffice to say, it wasn't looking good. "Close tower," Dusty said, and we looked with him. "Mare, heavy armor, combat shotgun. It looks like the tip of a rocket launcher leaning on the wall next to her."
Yeah, I see her.
Starlight said.
Sure looks like it.
"Okay, treat that as a high-threat target. That thing could ruin our day." His binoculars shifted a fraction. "Stallion in the other tower has a pipe rifle. Nothing special there. Looks like he got 4 grenades on that shelf next to him, though. Something to be aware of." Sickle groaned, and I lowered my binoculars to glance her way. She lay sprawled out on her belly beside us, her chin resting on the ground.
Bored.
Other than her occasional protests, she lay perfectly still. She'd even given up flicking her tail or shaking her head to chase off the flies that still pestered her. Dusty grimaced, but ignored her. "Star, let me know if you see that pony that was on the walls. See if you can scope out what gear she's got."
Can't see much of anything in there.
Starlight replied.
Caught a glimpse of something at the top of that tall building, but only barely. Some pony in armor.
Let me know if you see him again." He frowned. "Also, let me know if you see another way in besides those gates." He pondered the scene for a moment before asking me, "You still have those demolition charges?" I nodded.
The small charge? Yes, 4 blocks.
"You think you can knock down that gate with them if it comes to that?" I raised my binoculars, peering out across the distance.
Maybe I'd feel a lot more confident if we could see how it's mounted and barred. I've only got 5 pounds, so placement is going to matter. Maybe if we could pull one of those vehicle hulks over to tamp the explosives?
I glanced towards Sickle.
Though, even if the charges don't break down the gate, they should damage them enough so that Sickle could bust them open pretty quickly.
Dusty grunted and nodded.
What about flying?
Starlight asked. Not in daylight, Dusty said with a quick shake of his head. Way too visible, but if they don't have any lights, it might be viable after dark. Sickle groaned impatiently. And I kind of doubt Whisper can lift Sickle, Dusty added.
Maybe if I turn into a dragon or something.
I mused. Starlight lowered her lance to stare at me.
Holy crap, you can do that? Well, a little dragon, sure.
I said, scanning over the rooftops.
But big enough to lift Sickle, I'm not sure if I have enough magic for that. Even if I did, I'd probably be tapped out and useless afterwards. I can get over the wall fine on my own.
Sickle cut in, though she still hadn't moved from where she lay.
Even if I couldn't, I could go through it. Why aren't we killing these fuckers already?
Dusty sighed, shaking his head. Because we have no margin for error, so I want to gather as much intel as possible before we make a move. Sickle gave a particularly exaggerated groan.
Oh, fuck. I swear, Dusty, only you can make killing raiders boring.
Boring is good, Dusty said. Boring means we're not dying.
Means we ain't living either,
Sickle muttered. Anyway, we have flexibility in how we approach this. We can take the time to figure out the best way to proceed. He looked over to Starlight and me. Any suggestions? Sickle spoke up first.
Yeah, charge on down there, bust the fucking door in, kill every motherfucker that we see, and have a nice big celebratory fuck at the end of it all.
Dusty grimaced, but ignored her. After rolling her eyes at Sickle's response, Starlight asked,
Isn't tactics kinda supposed to be your thing?
Yeah, Dusty said, ears dripping a bit. Like I said, I'm not so sure of my judgment lately.
Why?
He frowned. That's not really important. I'll deal with it afterwards. We need to deal with this first. I had my own problems to dwell on, but this seemed important enough to speak out on.
I hope you'll pardon me,
I said.
But if you've gone from a confident tactical thinker and leader to hesitant to take responsibility, that seems like something that we should deal with before getting into another fight.
Dusty's ears pinned back, and he stared back at me for several long, unwavering seconds. Finally, he sighed, looking away again. It's all the shit with Emerald, and I don't mean losing some pony under my lead. It's the whole changeling thing. I didn't see it coming. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. What else am I missing? Starlight set her lancer down.
Hey, we didn't know Whisper was a changeling either. I mean, passing themselves off as something else is kind of their whole thing.
She gave a quick glance my way, as if I might be offended by what she had said, but I was already nodding in agreement. Sure, Dusty said, a hint of bitterness in his voice. But we didn't know changelings were a thing. Now we do, and Emerald. Shit, how could I not see it? The whole double life, secret shady past, working for ponies that act behind the scenes, not to mention the whole kindness and generosity act. My ears pinned back, my jaw and neck tightening.
That wasn't an act.
I'm just saying it makes sense for a changeling. You guys feed on love. Pretty sure she got plenty from that. My hooves dug at the ground.
She didn't do that for food, Dusty.
Maybe... I pushed myself up.
Not maybe. She gave her last healing potion to another pony, even though she knew that she was dying. It wasn't a fucking act.
Dusty's ears pinned back, blinking a couple of times. While I tried to control my breathing, somewhere behind me, Sickle grumbled. Starlight's hoof touched my side, and after a moment of silence, I relaxed and sagged back to the ground. After a moment, Dusty quietly and cautiously spoke again. Maybe she didn't realize how bad it was. Thankfully, Starlight took the opportunity to answer that one.
She had a pip buck, Dusty. Trust me, they aren't exactly subtle about telling you you're bleeding to death.
Dusty looked away, back towards the raider compound in the distance. His ears hung low. Even so, there were other signs. She lied to me, and I didn't even suspect it.
Us.
I said, swallowing back the final bit of the receding anger.
None of us realized it. And that includes the changeling infiltrator, who's much better trained and equipped to handle such a situation than you are.
He looks back at me, his eyes wary. You never even suspected?
Not until the very end. Before then, I made a point to avoid doing so.
His head tilted a hair to the side, and I answered his unspoken question.
It's far easier to see changelings where there are none than it is to find an actual changeling. I'm guessing you never heard of the changeling scare?
When he shook his head, I continued.
It was before my time, thankfully. After Chrysalis led her hive against Equestria, ponies started to suspect changelings everywhere. Ponies can be panicky like that. Strangers were changelings trying to steal your love. Unfriendly strangers were changelings that hated ponies. Charity workers were changelings trying to ingratiate themselves upon the vulnerable and unfortunate. Friends and family that had an off day were changelings who were bad at acting. It was like a precursor to the kind of xenophobia that would kick off during the war.
I gave a weak, derisive snort.
Of course, the real changelings were all playing normal, ordinary, consistent ponies. We're taught to blend in. We're also taught to avoid falling into the same suspicions those ponies did. We're trained to not see changelings in everything because 99% of the time, it's wrong. And constant paranoia over low-probability threats detracts from more legitimate concerns.
He frowned, staring down at his binoculars for a moment. And what if they really were a changeling?
In general?
I shrugged, then lifted my binoculars again.
It didn't matter.
But you're trying to find out they're changelings now. My ears drooped a little.
Yes, but I'm not gonna find them by trying to figure out which pony is secretly a changeling. Not unless they do something stupidly obvious like trying to feed off of me.
He remained silent, still frowning.
If it helps,
I said.
She was going to tell us. She just never got the chance.
My throat started to tighten up again. I focused on glaring through my binoculars. He mulled over that for several seconds before lifting his own binoculars again. Any suggestions on how to crack this? Sickle lifted her head barely off the ground.
We should just charge—
I heard you the first time. Dusty replied sharply, then moderated his tone by adding, I'd like to hear any other ideas before committing to that. I scanned again over the roofs, considering the layout of the small fortress.
If we wait for dark, I can do recon. I can fly over low inside of EFS range.
That could be useful, Dusty agreed. Though we'll get that information as soon as we get close anyway. Doesn't really help us get inside. I focused my gaze on the watchtower, with a bored-looking mare sitting beside the rocket launcher.
No, but if we're waiting for night, I think I might be able to take care of that.
Didn't expect her to snap at Dusty like that, and he even took it as well. Though, I suppose you can't really blame her. Now let's get on to our not-so-tense donators. Top donators are 630, Peter Coulthard, Jay Tinman, Darkside, Only One Thing, and Dash of Evergreen. Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Pastel Skies, Austin Rollins, Crazy Guy 557, Stu Hex, Sword Brother and Mordred, Omicron Lyra, Will, Chris, Twinkie, Hadzaza, Ridesoul, Maverick, Iron Sky, Badass Waffle, and many more awesome people. Thank you both so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.